Right, a massive welcome to Andrew Johnson with Secrets in the Solar System. Andrew runs all the W's, checktheevidence.com, where many subjects come under scrutiny, including 9/11 and the brilliant works of his colleagues, Dr. Judy Wood. Health, encompassing cancer, vaccines and energy medicine, and chemtrails and lots more. Tonight, Andrew looks at our solar system and also another organisation that also looks at our solar system. After spending billions of somebody else's money, NASA is denying evidence contained in its own photographs regarding water, the atmosphere and possible life, past or present, on Mars, and anomalies with the huge ring system of Saturn. Why is this? Well, let's have a look. Please welcome Andrew Johnson.
Okay, Rob, thanks very much. It's nice to be back here with everyone, and I'd like to thank you all for coming, particularly those that have come a long way. And hopefully I've got some interesting things to show you tonight, which I do get a bit annoyed about, as you'll probably see as we go through this. This talk basically is like an updated version of one that I did here in 2009, I think it was, which is just over 4 years ago. So I found out a few extra bits and pieces since then. So, you know, if some of it seems familiar to some of the few people in the audience, that's why it is. There are a few slides from that talk. So I'm hoping that this will work, and I might have to fiddle with the sound maybe, but hopefully that's all queued up. So here we go. What we're going to look at tonight, we're going to look at NASA and other scientific data about Mars, Phobos, which is an unusual moon of Mars, the moon Iapetus, which is one of the moons of Saturn, and we're going to look at some pictures of the Sun from SOHO, the SOHO probe, which I'll talk about later. We've got a lot of material here, so I'm not sure to skip over some things. Obviously come and ask me questions at the interval or at the end of the talk. I'll be happy to try and answer what I can. But what I've come to ask myself is, are most scientists deliberately ignoring the most intriguing data? Is that what's really happening? Does the data indicate life and intelligence, past or present, elsewhere in the solar system? And some of this, as I say, I showed in February 2009, that's 4 years ago. But I think they are actually ignoring data. And I think by the end of this presentation, you'll probably agree with me. So we're going to start off looking at Mars and some of the stuff I said I've shown before, but there's quite a lot of new stuff that I've discovered since 2009. Quick look at Mars. Well, it's almost like a sort of little brother of the Earth. And it's actually about 1/3 the size. And I think the gravity is, again, about 1/3 of what we've got on the Earth, according to standard figures. Some people disagree that the way that gravity is measured is not to do with the mass of the planet and so on. There's various sort of arguments and stuff. People like John Lear, for example, claim that the surface gravity on the moon is about 60% of that on the Earth, not 1/6. I don't know whether that's true. So Mars does actually seem quite similar to the Earth in many respects. And what we found is that there's been over 50 probes that have gone to Mars. I think it's about 59 have been to Mars, something like that now, since the 1960s. The first attempt was made by Marsnik program, the Russian Marsnik program, and Marsnik 1 went there in 1960, but most of these probes failed. They failed to reach the target, or they blew up, or they crashed into the sea or whatever. And Mariner 4 was the first successful probe which flew by the planet, and that took place in July 1965, and that was covered by our friend Richard Hoagland. That's when he started getting involved. That goes back quite a way, and that was covered on radio. And there have been over 50 mission attempts, as I say, with a number of failed and aborted missions, both from the USA and Russia. And the most sophisticated to date is probably the current Curiosity rover, so there's been a lot of renewed interest in the news over the last sort of 18 months or so because of this Curiosity rover, which is as big as a car. It's a very sophisticated instrument. I believe they spent $1 billion on this mission, which is a lot of money, obviously. But really, the first thing that I came across that was interesting was stuff from the Viking probe. And this is where some of the controversy really starts about Mars. And Viking 1 and 2, each consisting of an orbiter and lander, the primary mission objectives were to obtain high-resolution images of the surface of Mars, characterise the structure and composition of the atmosphere and surface, and search for evidence of life. So that was indeed one of the objectives of Viking, to search for evidence of life. Viking 1 was launched on August 20th, 1975 and arrived at Mars on June the 19th, 1976. Viking 2 was launched on September the 9th and arrived a bit later on July 1976. And the total cost of the Viking Mission 2 was roughly $1 billion, and that's going back to 1976. So these are huge sums of money you've got involved here. Now, you may recall, I recall actually seeing part of Viking being discussed on Blue Peter, because the person that designed this, I can't remember if I've got a picture, yeah, this arm here, I mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again because it's sort of emblazoned in my memory. The Viking lander's robot arm, which came out and dug into the soil, that was designed by a British guy at some British university, and he was on Blue Peter. And he did a talk about how he designed this arm and so on. And so I distinctly remember that. And I then remember hearing on John Craven's news round at the time that they had indeed discovered evidence for bacteria in the soil of Mars. And then about a year later, they said, no, it was a mistake. There weren't any microbes. It was actually to do with the chemistry that was used in the experiment, and the chemistry was wrong, and we didn't detect microbes after all. Again, the news doesn't tell you the truth. It doesn't give you the full story. On 28th of July 2001, Space.com reported that several scientists have found compelling evidence that the Viking Mars landers did indeed discover life on the Red Planet in 1976. A re-examination of findings relayed to Earth by the probes some 25 years ago claim the experts show the telltale signs of microbes lurking within the Martian soil. This is a key part. The inventor of the labelled release experiment, which I'll talk a bit more about in a minute, Gilbert Levin, said the Viking LR experiment detected living microorganisms in the soil of Mars. He added that after years and years of tests and over 24 non-biological explanations later, none of the many attempts to establish the oxidants mimicry of the LR data did so. What Gilbert Levin's experiment did was they got some dust from the Martian soil, they put it into this sort of chemical soup. The chemical soup, which had sugars in it, allowed bacteria in the soil to metabolise the sugars, which were laced with radioactive carbon, carbon-14, and they detected radiation being given off in the CO2. And that was the label release experiment. And the other life detector, we're going to hear more about this later on actually, so I won't spend much time on it here. And so basically he was convinced his experiment worked, but then NASA employed other people to debunk their own results. That's what they did. Richard Hoagland has claimed, and he's not the only person by the way, that when the Viking lander first came down on the surface, and we're going to come back to this very sort of time, they showed that this, I think maybe if we could have the lights down for some of this, because some of the colours we're going to need to see here, we've got a bit of a sort of light screen here. They showed that this was actually more of a bluish colour, but then somebody came in to mission control, tweaked the knobs on the monitors, and they gave the sky this reddish appearance. Right? So you can see here it's not that clear on this, but we'll see it more clearly in later shots. Got a bluish sky here, and they said, oh no, that's not right, there's something wrong with that. And he reports this in his book, Mars, the Living Planet, which he wrote with Barry D. Gregorio, and you can get that on Amazon if you want to. And what we've got here is, again, this looks quite washed out on this projector, unfortunately, but this is actually a very blue sky. I've got some booklets actually as well over there in the thing, and I've got some booklets on there, I've just got my laser pointer on it, which have got this picture in it. You can see it on my website as well, so you don't have to buy the booklets. But this is very clearly a blue sky. And the guy that created this picture, what he did was, this guy called Holger Isenberg, and you can go onto his website, he took the original Viking data, and as you may recall, or as you may know, the Viking images are actually taken they have 3 black and white images. They're taken through a red filter, a green filter and a blue filter. And then they recombine those images. It's actually a monochrome camera, and they create the colour image. Now, when you actually recombine those 3 colour images and you use the correct filter specifications, it comes out as a blue sky. And I've seen 4 separate analyses, one of which is by Gilbert Levin and his son Ron Levin. They've come out with the same result. Mars has a blue sky, no doubt about it. Now, and you're going to see how they've got away with saying that it's a red sky. I'm going to play you a clip now, all being well. I hope the sound's rigged up.
And there's the first piece of information coming in.
Oh. Say something, Tim. Yeah, I'm supposed to say something at this point. I just don't feel like talking.
Well, there are rocks.
There are rocks, yes. There's rocks and there's sediment, but it's just incredible to see that the Mars, is really there. Instant interpretation is always a little bit hazardous. Nonetheless, many of these boulders do look very similar to ones that we've seen in desert terrains here. Some of these boulders may be vesicular, that is, basaltic rocks, possibly volcanic rocks that have solidified in a gas-charged environment, and the released gases produce vesicles or holes. Just looks like a perfect set down.
The first picture of the Martian panorama.
As you look at the field of view in general, I think the most striking impression is one of a lot of rocks. And this automatically brings to mind the fact that we had a good deal of luck, because some of these rocks are about 2-3 meters across, and had the spacecraft landed on those rocks, it would have been disabled, probably permanently disabled.
Later high-resolution pictures confirmed the rocks were volcanic, but lying on dunes of fine sand. On the second day, the first pictures in color. Mars was indeed the red planet, or at any rate, blue-red. But the colors were false. It was noticed that one of the cables on the spacecraft wasn't orange enough. The color was corrected, and Mars turned even redder. The reason for their mistake? The sky. Everyone had assumed it would be blue, like on Earth. But on Mars, scattered dust turns the sky pink and makes sunsets purple.
Now, you may have recognised the dulcet tones of William Franklin, the famous actor from the 1970s. That clip you saw was actually from a 1976 documentary, I think. That was from a 1976 documentary, or 1977 documentary with William Franklin, but it was repeated within a 2009 documentary. And the point that I'm making is, they said the colour of the cable was incorrect. Do you remember? In that clip it said the colour of the cable on the lander was too orange. So they corrected it. They don't calibrate the colours on the Martian surface from a cable, and we can prove that that is untrue. These are the colour calibration charts on the Viking lander. They put them on the lander so that they could calibrate the colour images. The BBC is putting out false information. They deliberately falsified the colours. These are used to calibrate the colour on Mars, but they said it was a cable. That's extremely poor research, which was done. If I can work out that's false, the BBC should be able to. And they repeated that error in 2009. So they have a history of falsification of the colours of the colour of the sky on Mars. Mars has a blue sky. It has a red surface, right enough, but just because we have, the colour of the surface of the Earth doesn't dictate the colour of the sky. Over a forest, you don't have a green sky, do you? Or over a big football pitch, you don't have a green sky. The colour of the sky is dictated by the way that white light is scattered by small particles and gases that are in the atmosphere. Mars has a blue sky. Again, the blue's not coming out very well on this projector. I'm not sure why. This is blue. This is deep blue here. This should be blue. This is not red. And it's actually, this is an ESA picture from the Mars Express probe, which we'll mention a bit more about. So there's a history of them. You can clearly see, this doesn't have sky in it, but it is reflecting the colour of the sky, which is blue. And here again we've got colour problems with this image. This is where they're covering up the colours on Mars. Comparison between publicly accessible Mars Express images and those from Mars Global Surveyor. Mars Express is the European Mars probe, which is still orbiting Mars, went up in 2003. It had the ill-fated Beagle 2 lander attached to it, which crash-landed, apparently. So the one on the left has this sort of, is that algae, is it vegetation? But this is the Mars Global Surveyor image. Generally, the Mars Express images do seem to have better colour balance than the Mars Global Surveyor images, which tend to be all grey. And even with the Surveyor, the current Curiosity rover, you'll see a predominantly, if you go onto the NASA website and look at these pictures, you will see that even in this digital age of camera phones and advanced digital cameras that can do everything, you know, make the tea and everything, you're still getting black and white pictures from the Curiosity rover posted on the NASA website, primarily black and white. There's a few colour, but they're primarily black and white. Now we go back to the question of life on Mars again. We're going to go through a couple of instances of this. It was in July 2004, it was stated by Professor Vittorio Formisano that Mars Express, that's the European probe, instrumentation had detected ammonia, methane and even formaldehyde in the Martian atmosphere. These are so-called biomarker gases, indicating ongoing life processes. They come from living organisms. And formaldehyde is a particularly troublesome one because it has a very quick degradation time. It degrades within about 7 hours. Okay? So it means that if formaldehyde was in the atmosphere, it must be being reproduced regularly. In February 2005, Formisano said, "My observations should not be taken as a statement that there is life on Mars today, because we need to go there to drill the soil, take samples and analyse them before possibly concluding that life is there." Oh really, Dr. Formisano? Well, isn't that what Viking and Dr. Levitin's labelled release experiment did 29 years earlier? Why had he forgotten about that? So his result corroborates Levin's, but because they declared that as being false, it's not mentioned. And they keep reporting the discovery of life on Mars about every 4 years. They did it in 2009, they've been doing it again recently, which I'll come back to. Methane on Mars again. That was 2004. Now we've got NASA. Methane clouds could be evidence of life on Mars. And that was in 2009, 5 years later. The Belfast Telegraph. Same story. Same story. So yeah, repeat of 1976. And they also keep discovering water on Mars as well. Liquid water has been discovered about 6 or 7 times, and they're claiming it as a new discovery, which we'll come to again. But then this is what you get, you see. Let's see, yeah. They've also now just reproduced, on the same date NASA posted Martian methane reveals the red planet is not a dead planet. I'm getting this mixed up with the next slide. So this was on the 15th of January 2009. It's on NASA's website. Martian methane reveals the red planet is not a dead planet. That's on NASA's website, 2009. And now we've got it again. 4th of December 2012, 3 months ago or so. Wired magazine reports with a caveat. Curiosity rover detects water and organic compounds on Mars. The rover also detected its first organic compounds in the form of chlorinated methane created during the sampling analysis process within the Sample Analysis at Mars tool. Sounds similar to the labelled release if you ask me. However, while the chlorine is definitely from Mars, the carbon might be of more earthy origin carried to the planet by the rover. So to me it's a bit like saying, yes, we've discovered there are rocks on Mars. We've just discovered there are rocks on Mars. We know there are rocks on Mars. We saw them in 1976. We've seen them in all kinds of pictures since the 60s. But then they now debunk the methane reports. On 13th of December, the Discovery News reports, "Where's Mars's methane?" Curiosity draws a blank. So you get conflicting reports. Which is it? I know which story I believe. Now, you see, the problem with this is, now for NASA, is that there are a lot of good amateur researchers out there. Okay? And they're doing things. NASA has got to post this data publicly. Some of it they cover up, which again I'll come back to, but a lot of it is posted publicly. And what you're going to see here is like a summary of what I've just told you about the labelled release, along with some pictures from Ron Bennett.
I believe the Viking found life, and I think that maybe not intentionally, but scientists painted the wrong picture of what happened. You know, the message was put out that the Viking found nothing more than unusual active chemicals in the soil, that basically Mars was dead. And that's had a profound effect on everything that's followed, including the direction of the whole space program. So the question is, where did things go wrong? Well, back in '76, two identical spacecraft, Viking 1 and 2, landed on Mars. They both carried miniature biology labs, kind of about the size of a microwave oven. It was quite small, but they had 3 experiments which were looking directly for life on Mars, and they were the first spacecraft to do this, and incredibly, the only spacecraft that have ever looked for life on another planet. You know, in the 30-odd years since then, we've never sent out another probe to look for life, and that's because the mainstream science said Viking didn't find anything. So, you know, they carried out some experiments. I just want to zero in a couple of them. One was called the label release experiment. One was called a pyrolytic release. And the agreement was beforehand, if any of these experiments found a positive signal, then we would say that they'd found life on Mars, and that was thrown out the window later on. So what the label release experiment did was it took a sample of Martian soil, it dripped some water onto it, some goodies, some nutrients, kind of like a chicken soup type of thing for bacteria. And the neat thing was that those nutrients were laced with radioactive carbon. And the hope was that any bugs in the soil would metabolize that food and they'd give off radioactive carbon dioxide, which you could then pick up with a radiation detector, a Geiger counter. And lo and behold, that's exactly what it found, a big rush of radioactive carbon dioxide, which lasted for about 3 days. Exactly what you'd expect if there were bacteria in the soil, and not what you'd expect if there was a chemical reaction. It wouldn't last that long. There's no way. The other experiment, the pyrolytic release experiment, showed that organic chemicals were manufactured in the soil by something. That's kind of hard to explain without life going on. And these two together gave life signals. So why didn't scientists say that Viking had found life? Because according to the pre-agreed criteria before Viking ever left the launch pad, both of those experiments found life. The reason was there was another instrument on board Viking, which was called the GCMS. That stands for Gas Chromatograph Mass Spectrometer. And the whole purpose of that instrument was to look for organic material, anything containing carbon, basically, in the Martian soil. And that came up negative. It didn't find a single thing. It didn't find a single carbon-containing molecule in the soil. And it was used as a court of appeal, basically. So you've got 2 experiments saying, yeah, there's life here by pre-agreed criteria. Another instrument says there can't be life, no organics, you can't have life. But that instrument wasn't working properly. And we know it wasn't working properly. It's been demonstrated. It was demonstrated even before Viking took off, although it wasn't really well known or advertised. But in several studies since then, identical equipment to the GCMS been tested on Antarctic soils, on soils from deserts regions on Earth, which are similar to Mars, and it has failed to find life where we know there is life by other instruments. And so this Court of Appeal instrument was faulty. We know it couldn't have detected organic material on Mars, and yet that's the way it panned out, that scientists used that as a way to say there's no life on Mars. So the GCMS found nothing, and so what did the Viking scientists team do? They dismissed the positive readings of the other 2 experiments, and they said that the activity in the soil was due to some kind of reactive chemical like hydrogen peroxide, and that was that.
So that basically there, I didn't clarify that before I introduced it, was from the Phoenix lander, which operated, I think, for a period of about 6 months. I think it landed near the polar regions. I don't know all the details of all the missions. But the Phoenix lander landed near the polar regions of Mars and it operated for about 6 months, and it had a microscope on it, so it was taking very close-up images of the soil. And what you saw there was an amateur researcher's stop frame animation where he took sequences of the images and strung them together. NASA didn't do that. He did it. And he discovered the movement of what appears to be bugs, microbes, something. Something is moving. And he basically ruled out from, that's what this reasoning is here, he ruled out that it was things blowing in the wind. It wasn't that. And I think you'll agree that in the pictures that you saw, were obviously very indistinct, but you could see that there weren't a whole, they're moving in different directions, and there were little things moving rather than just, whole lots going off at once. So these were very small things, less than the width of a human hair in some cases. But then the Phoenix lander stopped working soon after those images were taken. We don't know why. So that's an example of amateur research, and I'll show you another example later on if we get a chance. And I mean, there are several sites looking at these anomalies on the surface. You get anomalies both at the small scale and the large scale if you look for them. And there was one site called Mars Anomaly Research, which has gone offline now, and that was a bit of a mixed bag. It had some interesting stuff on there, but I think this one was posted on there. And in case you didn't see it, what the hell is that? I know what I think it looks like. Of course, it's meant to be random rocks, but it certainly doesn't look like that to me. Could be anything, but it certainly looks very strange. Now then, the other thing which caught my attention a few years ago, and again this goes back to 2004, NASA have said there may have been life at one time, but they claim not to know really, said they haven't got enough data. Well, these pictures are from Spirit and Opportunity rovers. They were a pair of rovers that landed on Mars in 2004. Again, fairly big budget project, a pair of rovers. I think one of them's still operating. I think one of them, the battery ran out a couple of years ago. One I think is just about still going. And they've driven about 3 kilometres or something across the surface or something. And Sir Charles Schultz III, a US scientist and researcher, and that's his website there, I think he's found fossils on Mars. He says that this is a sea urchin in this picture, and this is a seashell. I've got a news clip of him here, I think. Yeah, and here's I think this is a crinoid, and this is a trilobite, or trilobite, some people call it. That's NASA's pictures. You can go. I've got the references for those. You can go and look. They're on NASA's website. They deny it. This guy was. I'll just play the clip. I think. Here we go. And this is that's an Earth seashell, and that's from a NASA picture from the, I think either the Spirit or the Opportunity lander.
Well, last month, a NASA scientist in Alabama stunned the world when he said he discovered evidence of alien life. His claim was based on fossil remains he supposedly found in a meteorite. The next day, however, NASA said their researchers' work was flawed and unreliable. However, claims of alien life and fossils are nothing new for NASA. For the past 7 years, they've been dealing with the Winnsboro man and his research. And his work may very well change our way of thinking forever.
Ever since the Viking probe landed on Mars in 1976, NASA has been trying to find out if life once existed or if it still exists there today. 30 years later, in December of 2006,
today you will hear what many are saying may be the most significant discoveries to date.
NASA scientists released photographs that suggest there is life. Pictures that show water on Mars.
We can honestly talk about liquid water on the surface of Mars today.
The news was reported in the national media and was hailed as a major discovery. The only problem, another man says he made the very same discovery nearly 3 years earlier.
You came to the conclusion that there was water and life on Mars when?
The date when I was first certain of it was February 15th, 2004.
Charles Schultz looks and sounds like a modern-day Einstein. Using the Freedom of Information Act, he obtained more than 200,000 Mars images from NASA. And after thousands of hours of research, he came to some startling conclusions.
Many of the things that I've seen look very clearly like